Welcome, my friends, to Inside the Minds of Authors. I'm DC Gomez, and I'm thrilled you're joining me today for a fun conversation with a passionate author. We're kicking off the program, like it's our tradition, with a short reading from the feature book. I hope you guys enjoy it. Let's get started.
Hi, everybody. This is Donna Conrad. I'm reading from my book called The Last Magdalene. And today I'm going to read the prologue, which is, of course, the opening of the book and sets it up for the story and why Miriam, the Magdalene, whom we now know as Mary Magdalene, why she's going to tell her story. Prologue. I have heard tales of my madness. The village wives bring them to me with requests for potions and charms. They tell me my madness is of Satan. My madness is divine trance, that I take neither food nor drink, for angels sustain me, that I am a great sorceress, that I raise the dead. Truths and lies tangled in a web of time and man's deceit. Yet I shall try to unravel the threads of my life for you. Though I believed my time had passed, my madness merely delusions found in the realms of the dead. Until one day in early spring, I saw a young woman kneeling before me on the smooth stone floor. I paid her little mind, thinking her an apparition. But then she spoke, sweetly requesting an amulet and a blessing for her marriage. My body ached, and I knew I was still of this world. I reached out to her and did not recognize my own hands, spotted and withered, the skin a transparent sheath. Still, I took her face in my hands and held it close. Despite my heart's desire to be free of this world, the touch of a stranger's flesh brought back a deep yearning for life. Her scent filled my senses, releasing some morsel of the pain that brought me to this cave in southern Gaul. Then I kissed her lips. Her breath mingled with mine, and from that kiss, I was returned to myself. She smiled shyly and hesitated before taking the talisman I offered, asking if I were truly a holy woman, as she believed, or a demon, as the village elders warned. And I knew in that moment I must write the story of my life and of lives greater than my own. For you have been told only half truths about the man, Yeshua Bar Yosef, he who was crucified on Golgotha in the land known to Rome as Judea. And you have been told only lies about me, Miriam of Bethany, the last Magdalene.
Hi, everyone, and welcome back to Inside the Minds of Authors. I am so thrilled you guys are joining us today. It's going to be a fabulous interview. I have an amazing guest. If you're new to the podcast, go ahead and subscribe. You don't want to miss a single episode. We have new authors with amazing books Monday nights here with you. And if you want to give us an extra love, go ahead and review the podcast. Share it to a friend. We're always better when we're growing together. So go ahead and join the community. And because you guys are here to find out who I have on this show, let's welcome Miss Donna. Hello, madam. How are you?
Good morning, afternoon, evening, whatever it is, whenever you're listening to this. I am doing great today. And yourself?
I am fabulous. I'm excited to have you on the show. Every time we have authors, I get re energized. And we're just going to jump in because I want to know the last Magdalene. It is such a controversial topic, believe it or not. What made you decide to write this book? Let's jump into it.
Actually, because it is so controversial, I feel that people have been told a certain story for going on 2,000 years now. And that story has been mainly directed by a male perspective because it was men who ran the church, and originally it was the Catholic Church, which means universal. So it was the universal story that was told. And yet, there's one woman who figures prominently throughout the New Testament, and her name is mentioned more than any woman, with the exception of Jesus's mother. And that woman is Miriam. We know her as Mary Magdalene. And I felt that if she had survived through 2,000 years of alterations and books being included and excluded and written and rewritten, she had to have a awfully important role in what turned out to be a pivotal event in Western history, and some people say in world history. And that was the creation or the arrival of Christianity. And yet she was Jewish. She was a woman of intelligence and passion and courage. And so I felt it was about time that she got to speak for herself.
I need to know, how much research did you do into her life and where did you find the material?
So there's very little mentioned about Judea and that particular time outside of the Gospels. And those need to be taken anytime you're doing research. If someone has a particular slant, you need to back away and look at it critically to say, what was the story they were trying to tell? Because Judea was a bit of a backwater to Rome, to Greece. It was at the bottom of the Silk Road. They did have certain things they traded, but it really wasn't that important. Rome came in and took over Syria, and in doing so, they kind of annexed Judea and Galilee. So my sources are mainly from other countries around the Mediterranean basin, in particular Egypt, which had a thriving trade with Galilee and Judea. So you look to those sources, you look to other sources that didn't specifically deal with Judea, but dealt with the surrounding areas, because in those days, not that much changed that quickly. So you can look into that. We also have Josephus, Flavius Josephus, who's our closest historian, and he was writing in about 70 AD. This book takes place, the first book in the series ends in 30, current era. So he was very close to this and spoke about life and times. Also, archaeology. The digs that are going on in the Holy Land are phenomenal. What they're finding, the way that they can give us an idea of what life was like. So it's skirting around, and the events in the book basically follow the New Testament because it's a chronological order. And other than that, other historical sources, mostly archaeological sources and Egyptian.
How long did it take you to put this book together?
Geological time. The research itself took about 18 months, getting everything in place. And my process is to do as much research as I can right up front so that I know the time, I know the places, I know what people wore, what they ate, what they drank, how they move from place to place. And then I set that aside and get to know my characters. And then they kind of take over. So writing the book, I would say start to finish was probably at least a year.
That is not bad at all.
That's not bad at all. But then now we get to the edits and the rewrites that, as you know, as an author, can go on forever, or what seems like it. I love C.C. Humphreys, who is a great historical fiction writer, once said, someone asked him, "When do you know your book is finished?" And he said, "When my agent rips it out of my clutching hands and says, 'You're done. That's it.'"
That's usually a good way to see it. Yes, absolutely. As you went down
So,
this research process and you put this book together, were there things about Mary Magdalene that you find out that most people were never aware of?
yes, in the Mediterranean basin, there was always a divine feminine aspect that was honored. And yet we've been told over and over that the Hebrews had one God. That was it. And yet at this time, there was still the adoration or the turning to a female deity. And we find that in archaeological digs where there are small statues about the size of your thumb that have a definite feminine dimension to it. And there are grooves rubbed into these stones from women rubbing them with their thumbs. So there it's about the size of a thumb groove that would go through it. And that led me to believe that the divine feminine in the form of Ashara that we hear of in the Old Testament was still being the aspect of divinity that women would turn to. And so in the book, I say when babes are hard to birth, it's a priestess women call, not a priest. And so I've developed this society of priestesses. And that's where the term Magdalene comes from. It is a title because, mostly unbeknownst to people, the town of Magdala, supposedly Miriam of Magdala, which it doesn't say. It says Miriam Magdalene or Miriam the Magdalene in Aramaic, didn't exist at this time. It was renamed that later, just that as Nazareth did not exist. There was a town there, but it wasn't called that. And the town that they now call Magdala was called Trisea. And so to promote the fact that a woman came from a town that didn't exist at that time is more unbelievable to me than saying Magdalene was a title. And Magda in Hebrew means exalted, honored, a tower. And so I have it much like we know now in the Arthurian legends that Merlin was not a person, it was a title for the chief druid. And the druid that served King Arthur, his name was Taliesin, but he was called the Merlin. So it is my contention that she was Miriam the Magdalene, which means she was a high priestess of Ashar, who
Ooh,
we have some proof was still being worshipped.
you have touched in so many different things all at once. It's the beautiful thing about books is the
Mhm.
fact they open conversations and
Yes.
make you think differently and make you look at things from a perspective that you normally wouldn't. Whether you believe it or not, it's up to the individual. Is the fact that you opened the conversation and brought this to light that I'm just like, ooh, so much fun. But you also said this
Yeah.
was a series. You're gonna have to tell us more. What is this? Tell us.
It is a series that's going to follow Miriam throughout her life. And as the prologue suggests, she, according to French legend, that she lived to be in her late 80s and went to southern Gaul at that time, which is around in the areas of Provence, Languedoc, what is now southern France. What to consider is that Rome had occupied Judea at this time, and they were a brutal, oppressive, domineering. They put the patriarch in patriarchal. I mean,
Oof.
it just were
Yes, they did.
horrible. Yes, they would go into a land, they would take it over, and they'd say, "We don't care what you believe, you're now Roman. Make the world Rome." So if someone was accused of insurrection, if someone even mentioned that Rome could do something differently and they weren't Roman citizens, they were crucified and crucified by the hundreds, by the thousands during this time. But anyone connected with someone who was convicted of insurrection, which Yeshua bar Joseph, that we know now as Jesus, the son of Joseph, all of his disciples, anyone connected with him, would have been wanted by Rome. And we read in the scriptures, they all ran away and hid. Well, there was a good reason to go hide. There really was. So after the crucifixion, the Magdalene was taken to Egypt, to Alexandria. And that's where the next book takes place, The Lost and the Holy. And it's her sojourn in Egypt. And then the following book, A Woman Unto Herself, is when she goes to southern Gaul. And the fourth book is called The Song of Sarah, and it is her daughter retelling the story from quite a different perspective.
Ooh. Woman empowering books, woman perspective is always something that sometimes in literature is lost. Just like in the scriptures, we get blamed for everything. I'm like, how does this happen? How is this? We're the worst criminals in history when you're looking at the scriptures sometimes. And at the same time, we're there. So it's not like they can wash her away. They can't say she wasn't present. They can't say she wasn't a prominent figure, but it tends to be very much one-sided. So the fact you're bringing these conversations to the forefront, I am in love with it. I am fascinated. But as an author, you have other books you have worked, you dabble in many different things. Can you tell us about that? What else have you done?
Before this book came House of the Moon Surviving the 60s. It is a raw, gritty, very real memoir about my growing up in Los Angeles in the 60s. And I wanted to retell the story again of the 60s from a realistic point of view and what it was like to be an ordinary person growing up, a teenager in the 60s. But I didn't quite have an ordinary life because my father was an undercover narcotics agent for the state. And my sister's boyfriend dealt drugs to all the bands that came through LA. So, talk about a little schizophrenic. Yeah, we could do that. So, I knew when I was like 14, 15, I knew people like Jim Morrison, Jimi Hendrix, Janis Joplin, Joni Mitchell, all of these people at a very young age to warn everybody as a first person, present tense. And it is very much from the perspective of whatever year I was in. It only covers 4 years, from 14 to 18. Everything in it happened, and there was a lot that happened. And it was a time when women were marginalized more than I think women today can comprehend. We could not buy a house. We could not get a credit card in our own name. We couldn't hook up telephone service or have utilities in our own names. And just the sexual violence against women was always what you were saying earlier in the Bible. It was always caused by the woman. It was always the woman's fault. They enticed a man to rape them. Excuse me? Oh, yeah, the man had no idea of anything until that woman enticed him. It was the law. I mean, for people to realize that rape inside of marriage was legal. There was no such thing. A husband could force his wife to do whatever and beat her and nearly kill her. And there was no law against that because they were married and she was his property. So I wanted to show that in a very realistic way and show how women were treated. So I say my mission as an author is to give voice to women who are marginalized. And unfortunately, that's most women in history.
How do you allow yourself to become that vulnerable and open those parts of your life? Because it's not easy for anybody who's ever thought about writing pieces of their lives. You're putting yourself out there for the world. And once those words are out, everybody can take them for whichever way they want. How do you do it? How do you protect yourself to making yourself open to the world?
So to protect myself, I think it is a matter of my personal integrity and my gaining strength and courage within myself to say, this is the truth as I know it. This is the truth as I experienced it. Or in the case of the last Magdalene, this is the truth as far as I know from my research. To me, if I'm honest and self aware, then it's okay. This is what happened. This is what happened to me. And in House of the Moon, I don't come off looking really great. I made really stupid decisions. I mean, what teenager doesn't? Luckily, I'm one of the teenagers that lived through some pretty violent, brutal episodes and am still here. So to me, it's self awareness, but also saying perhaps other people can learn from this and learn to accept what they've done without shame. Because as you mentioned earlier, women are shamed into silence. And we think, Oh my gosh, if I say I did this, the opening chapter in House of the Moon is a Hells Angels party in the woods when I'm 18 years old. And to say, yes, I went there. I thought it was a good idea. I thought it was great. That is showing the truth of a relatively naive 18-year-old. And to say, maybe other people, look what happened to her. Maybe it's not such a good idea.
I love the fact that you're creating these conversations and that you are tackling issues that are all about us, women being marginalized, that the abuse against women across the world is terrifying. So usually people don't understand. It's like I give grace every day that I live in the United States because while we're not perfect, there's still laws protecting us now, not something that we
Exactly.
had.
That is a part of why I really would like people to read House of the Moon, because women of my generation fought to have rights. And those rights are being rolled back now in the United States. And the right to our own body, the right to regulate who and when people can touch us is so important. And that did not exist when I was growing up. We marched, we protested, we fought for the simple freedom to say we have a right to exist, we have a right to equal treatment under the law, and we have a right to determine our own future. And that is something that I think young women today might take for granted. And it was hard fought for. And so keep up the fight. Every time a judge rules that, which we know in the college rape case, I'm not going to sentence him to anything because it's going to hurt his career as he gets older. Well, his career deserves to be hurt if he raped a woman. And that is that. But we hear these stories and say, this needs to be protested. This needs to be brought out.
Somehow lately we focus on a lot of the movements and we only think of the workplace. But right now we have a lot of violence against each other. And now we're trying to
Yes.
validate it. We're trying to kind of justify it. Is there really justification for somebody being raped? And right now, one of the things I do a lot of advocacy, rape against men as well, that nobody wants to talk about, nobody wants to discuss. So these conversations need to be had. The fact that you put it in writing, that people can look at it and can truly digest it in the comfort of their own home, it's what it's all about. So thank you so much.
You are very welcome.
We need these
And
words
thank
out
and
there.
to and yeah, and thanks to everybody that does take it seriously and does say that. And to me, if you violate another person's right to their body, to their thought, then the blame, the consequences should come back to the person, to the perpetrator, not to the victim. Now there's this thing, oh, I don't want victimhood. Well, there's a difference between being the victim of a crime and feeling victimized. There's a difference. I was the victim of a very brutal rape when I was 15 years old, but it did not make me a victim. And there is a difference to that. If you stand up and if you say, yes, I was victimized, but I refuse to become quiet. I refuse to feel like I'm a victim and I have no power. You have power. As the power of the word. It's the power of marching, power of not hating. Let's put it that way. That if we start hating everybody that does wrong to us, we're no better than they are. So find a space in your heart to forgive yourself, to understand you are not to blame. Perhaps your decision was poor, but you're not to blame and you don't need to blame somebody else. You can stand up for your rights without hatred,
That is
if that
powerful.
makes sense.
It
Yeah.
does. And you mentioned the fact of hating yourself because sometimes we turn all that anger and hate internally and just continue to poison ourselves and the people around us because we're trying to heal. And instead of that, is trying to, whose blame do we put? So healing is huge. I'm loving the fact that you said it really well. You can be a victim of a crime without becoming victimized. You don't have to become that person, but you can take your experience and empower others by living your best life and moving forward. So, Miss Donna, you have me like all riled up today. I was like, what time is it? Where do we
Okay.
need to go? I
Where do
absolutely
we do?
love it. Thank you.
Well,
Thank
and
you.
that's that. Oh, you are so welcome. And the more this message gets out, the better. And it's the theme of The Last Magdalene also. Here is a woman who has been systematically written out of history. And if you think about it, she's mentioned more than any other woman except Jesus's mother. She's the apostle to the apostle. If you think about it, she's the first one to see that he had risen from the grave. And then where is she? She's written out of the rest of history. She's not mentioned again. Why? What happened to her? I mean, where did she go? What all of a sudden it's like, okay, you served your purpose, now go away. And that to me was one of the motivating factors to write her story because I believe in, and it is historical fiction. I don't know what happened to her. I don't know the day to day. That's the fictionalized part. But I'm presenting her as a strong, independent, highly intelligent, highly courageous, passionate woman who was important enough to be included in a male dominated, male perspective telling of a story that gave birth to a new religion.
That alone says a lot about her in the perspective that they couldn't wipe her out completely. So it makes you wonder,
Yes.
who was she? And since we're talking about the book, where can our listeners find this book? Where they can learn more about you? Let's go into that. Tell us.
Okay. It is available for right now. I am hoping that every year in April, I'm trying to do this around Easter and Passover, the release, because it involves both religions. Not so much Christianity, but what later became Christianity. Any of your regular sources, you can get the book. If you go to my website, which is really difficult, donnaconrad.com. See if that works. donnaconrad.com and sign up, and you'll get a chance to enter for a hardback copy of the book and also find out where it's released and some of my articles. And I'm starting to do little 3-minute videos called Weaving Women's Tales. And it's going to be just little snippets of different women throughout time, what their stories are, and how they are still relevant today to what women are going through. So, donnaconrad.com.
By the time this episode releases, the book is available. You guys can go and pick it up, check out the website. You should have a lot of material there now. So go ahead and enjoy. Miss Donna, before you leave us, are you ready for the lightning round?
Oh my goodness. Yes.
Easy peasy. Don't think too much about it. Pancakes or waffles?
Pancakes.
Nice. City or country?
Country. Depends on the day. Maybe city.
I'll give you both. All good. Early bird or night owl?
Night owl.
Summer or winter?
Winter.
Okay. Here's a little different. If your life had a theme song, what would it be?
We Are the Champions by Queen.
Oh, that is a good one. Nice.
You gotta love Queen.
Yes. Madam, it has been a pleasure having you on the show. Do you have any closing remarks for us?
For writers, keep going. Never give up. Just write the next story and keep writing. The world is in desperate need of stories of passion and honesty. And for readers, you make everything we do worthwhile.
That is so good. To our listeners, make sure to check out the fabulous Miss Donna. Check out her website. And when you're there, go ahead and give us a like. Make sure you subscribe to the podcast. You don't want to miss an episode. And I'll see you guys again next week on Monday. Bye.